Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Polly Dawkins, Executive Director of the Davis Phinney Foundation, and we are thrilled that you are here with us today. And we are thrilled to have a special guest for our Care Partner Meetup this month. And I would love to turn it over to Connie Carpenter-Phinney.
Hey, thanks, Polly, and welcome everyone. Again, Happy New Year. It is a new year. It's a great time of year for me because I like it when the days start getting longer. We've got a regular panelist with us. We've got Gail Gittin from Boulder, Colorado, but today she's in Tucson. Welcome, you lucky devil. And Pat Donahue is joining us from his car in the parking lot of his school, where he doesn't have a lot of time today to join us. But remember, Pat and Gail, and Pat's in Las Vegas. Yeah. Pat and Gail are both ambassadors with the Davis Phinney Foundation. You can find them on our website. They're an incredible resource to you. They're both care partners. Gail lost her husband 4 years ago, as many of you know, but she is such a font of information and support for the caregiving community that love having you guys on here with us. And please contribute. And Pat, especially since you don't have a lot of time today, when you want to jump in, have at it. But let me introduce Al and let Al talk a little bit too about himself. We're so happy to have a special guest, Al Condeluci, with us. He is normally coming to us from Pittsburgh, but is visiting family in Orlando.
Yeah, it's great to be in the sun. You know, I know you're getting snow over there in Colorado, and Pittsburgh was hit with a snowstorm last evening, and then today, and all the kids were off school, and the temperature is in the 20s, wind chill in the single digits, but. I'm happy to be with my daughter and her husband and my wife and our little grandson Bodie in Orlando. So it's been wonderful. We got down here on Christmas Eve, and we're going to stay through the month of January. So thanks for letting me plug in, albeit from this remote position.
Yeah, I love it. And Al, for those of you not familiar, Al had given a number of talks for our foundation at live events we've done, and actually some virtual events too. Not only did his father had Parkinson's disease, and he experienced firsthand what it's like to be a care partner and what it's like to see someone you love and deal with someone you love with Parkinson's, but also he's an expert in all things social capital and social isolation and all these kind of things. And Al, I mean, how do you introduce yourself? But you're such a great resource, and we're so happy to have you. So welcome.
Yeah. Well, I'm so delighted to be here as well. And I think I define myself more as an advocate for inclusion for any persons who are marginalized or devalued. My dad, in his journey with Parkinson's, sort of self-isolated in many ways. And we worked really hard as a family to try to keep Dad involved and engaged in community. But my career path has really been as an advocate. I was associated with United Cerebral Palsy in the early parts of my career. That organization, that was United Cerebral Palsy of Pittsburgh, that organization sort of morphed into a broad-based community living and support system serving over 1,000 folks with disabilities in the Pittsburgh region. And I was with that organization for close to 50 years, was the CEO there for 35 of those 50 years. We supported folks with all types of disabilities, including Parkinson's. So folks that had both congenital disabilities from birth or from early in childhood, to folks who acquired their disabilities later on in life through traumatic brain injuries or through the onset of things like Parkinson's or MS. And so in my career path, have really focused in on keeping people engaged in community, building relationships, keeping relationships, and thriving in the greater community.
And this
I
is
think
so
there's a
hard right
tendency.
now, right? This is so hard for all of us right now, especially. But so you've been doing
Absolutely.
this for decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
It's really been, the thing, Connie, that's so, I think, interesting to me as an observer, is that most disability related support systems um, tend to be separated out. They tend to be congregative. And there is obviously a need for individuals that are experiencing certain types of disabilities and their families to understand their disability and to be able to navigate through the disability support system.
right.
But on the other side of the coin is that, when people get extracted from the greater community into some separate, segregated, or congregated situation, they can become isolated. They can become disconnected, and that has all kinds of both internal and external ripples in someone's life.
Yeah.
So part of our agenda is really how can we keep people engaged in the greater context of community as opposed to getting sort of separated out into, into separate little tribes or worlds that don't represent really the greater community.
Right. And that's that is a big part of the Davis Phinney Foundation and some of the programs we've created or the kind of messaging we have, but so hard sometime in practice for people, depending on where they live. If you're in a metropolitan area, there's usually a lot of opportunity, but it may take a lot of effort to get out and see people. Here in Boulder, Gail is very involved with all the Parkinson community here. And, and it takes a lot of people, as Gail knows, to keep that going and, to keep people coming out and getting together. But we talked a little bit earlier about, kind of virtual meetups. And I'm wondering how much value does that have to us as humans? If you can speak to that, I don't know, but it's an interesting question, right? Because so many of us during the pandemic started to really retreat, and then we became very expert at Zoom. But is Zoom enough?
Right. And I think there's, virtual community is real. People who, live and die by Facebook, they say good night every night to their Facebook friends. And that's a really important part of their persona. I think there's real power in virtuality. It allows us to stay connected over miles and through distance. But there's something also missing by not being, with people, eye contact, and all the other kinds of things that happen when we're together, and that I think virtuality can never ever replace some of that powerful stuff. And so a lot of, I think, when you take the pandemic, for example, Connie, that's a good example. When all of us were separated and segregated from one another and from various parts of our community life, loneliness went through the roof in terms of people's measure of their lives and the quality of their lives. But loneliness has been on the rise even pre-pandemically. That Cigna insurance company did a big study in 2018 where they looked at 30,000 Americans just generally, and they used the UCLA loneliness scale, which is an interesting measure, Connie. It has 20 questions, and you sort of rate yourself with each question. You rate on a Likert scale, Is this always happen? Does this sometimes happen? Does this rarely happen? Does this never happen? And it yields a score, and so it's quantifiable. So the Cigna insurance company used this UCLA scale. And by the way, that UCLA scale has been out there since 1968, attempting to measure loneliness. And what Cigna discovered after this large 30,000 person study was that loneliness had risen dramatically in our country from the last time that it was generally measured. And this was pre-pandemic. The Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, actually wrote a book about loneliness that's a very powerful expose on the lethality of loneliness and how loneliness can actually is akin to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Let me just stop you there, because I remember when you first said that in a public talk, and it really takes you back to think about the cost of being isolated and lonely, and the ensuing loneliness that you'll fear. And I would venture to guess that the loneliness scale for people with Parkinson's, people caring for people with Parkinson's, would be very high or low, depending on how you're looking at it, right? And so the cost to your health, though, those of us who are very health-minded might not realize how much damage it's doing, right? And so the question is, how can we undo this kind of damage, and what counts? What kind of interventions are possible? And this is not just for a person with Parkinson's, right? So we as care partners can get very isolated and in a silo, because we haven't, got outlets. Gail, did you have something to add? Sorry.
Yes, we always say to the care partners, they should take care of themselves, take care of themselves. The best way to take care of yourself is to get out with other people and socialize and get back into a different normalcy, not your daily normalcy, whatever that is, but a new normalcy. And that is the best medication for the caregiver. And that's exactly what we mean about self-care, not so much a massage or things like that. Just get out there and live.
Yeah. You're right, Gail.
But also, I think, Pat, did you have something? Sorry, I know you don't have much time, so.
Yeah, I've got to get going, but we do a support group here and have a foundation here in Las Vegas for Parkinson's. And one of the biggest things that we've found is that the isolation, even with the online virtual things, it's once we got back together and we're able to do things together again, that brought people out and kind of opened up their let them blossom, so to speak. And again, but still we're still finding that pandemic is lingering in apathy and with anxiety and things like that from being isolated. And as we get, as a care partner, it's like, okay, it's time to get up and move. It kind of, and then I'm going to go do this. And so at our house, it's been challenging. We've been dealing with a lot of anxiety from Parkinson's, and as well as some of the anxiety. I mean, anxiety comes in all forms, but it is a subset of Parkinson's, and it's been a big challenge. But yesterday, Sydney was approved for the new subcutaneous pump that is going to hopefully. When she was on the Duopa pump, it was something that helped with her anxiety, and so yesterday I just got it. It was for me. It was a little bit of relief in the hope that it takes care of those symptoms. And so both of us can find some form of normalcy again. And
that's actually a really good point that you're bringing up, Pat, because part of part of being isolated, part of, staying home is related to some of the symptoms of Parkinson's, as well as some of the symptoms of the medications or not being medicated properly or not taking advantage of, new medications that are coming out. And you're referencing some medications that a lot of people probably don't have experience with. But at the same time, it's because you guys have been on this journey for quite a while, and because your wife has been suffering so much, and because you're very aggressive in your treatment, in terms of trying to find options. And that's something that we counsel a lot on here, Al, is for people, if they're not, if their doctor is dismissive, if they're not helpful enough, you've got to change doctors.
Absolutely.
We got into our doctor just last Friday and our movement disorder. And, we talked about how the fact that the past year, a year ago, we went to Chicago and met with the top people in Chicago, Western. Before that, we were at Cedar Sinai and stuff. So we've been out and we've researched and to make sure that what we're getting here is what we consider to be the best. And we know that we have the best care from where we're getting it here in Las Vegas, because he mirrors a lot of the top people that we've met with out, around the country. And it's good stuff, but changing is a good thing. But anyway, I've got to run, but this is great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking in with us, Pat.
All right. We'll
Great to see you, Pat.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
A couple of questions. See you, Pat. We got a couple of questions and comments in the chat. I wonder if we could just get those quickly. Folks have mentioned the care partners can go out and do things on their own, but they worry about leaving their person. And how do you balance that? How do you balance the need for your own social interaction and your person being left home alone?
Yeah, that's really an excellent point and observation. Because in some ways, our individuality as human beings need to be tended to. Obviously, as care partners, we're aligned closely with the person we love or the person that we care for, and that sometimes feel sort of joined at the hip. So I think there needs to be some, ability to sort of look at both that person being away from you, the person you're caring for being away from you, and with other people who they value and who value them, is healthy as well. So, and that gets to, I think, a really important point, Polly, that we need to think about. We were talking about this a bit before we went online with our group today, and that is that the general community and people in the general community oftentimes don't think that they have any relevance to someone experiencing a disability, that person is getting what they need somewhere else, or getting it from some expert who understands their condition, whatever their condition might be. And so that it's not a malevolent kind of disconnection. It's just more around sort of seeing persons as sick and as being needy, and that they really don't know what to say or do in that case. So they dismiss persons with disabilities, thinking that they're going to be taken care of, and this is going to, they're going to get their social needs from their tribe. And that, I think that mentality has to be challenged. I think that the notion of dismissing someone who is different from you because perhaps they have tremor, or because of their cognitive reality, or whatever the uniqueness is of the experience that the person's having. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing recently has really been, how do we soften the general community to be more inclusive, to be more welcoming of somebody or something that's not typical in your experience, right? And so I think that there's a lot of different moving parts in terms of challenging and dealing with loneliness and isolation for the caregiver, for the person receiving care,
Yeah.
and then the greater community.
Now, let me jump in to say too that as we talked about this too, is that, think about, and people that are listening, think about what is the main reason that either you or your person with Parkinson's doesn't go out more. Think about that.
Yeah.
You can put those thoughts in the chat too. Like, what is the main reason? And we talked about
Yeah.
how one of those reasons, anyone with a disability feels a certain level of scrutiny, people looking
Yes.
at them, and then
Yeah.
ensuing shame. It's kind of a natural condition, right? To feel shame over not, or over being less than or something.
Yes.
The
Yes.
other thing is many people with Parkinson's don't exhibit overt symptoms at times, but we recognize them, like some of it is in terms of their non-reactive face, we call it facial masking and
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that, where it looks like your person is bored or not paying attention when in fact they could be holding rapt attention behind that mask, right? And so there's all these things that are unknown, unseen. And one of the things we do talk about when we do go out, and Gail, you've been good about this too, is letting your family or your friends know what the symptoms are, what to expect. And even, really detailing it. And not everyone's going to read that missive that you send out on email or whatever, but at least you've tried. And it can apply to other groups too, whether you had played in a bridge group or whatever your social groups were before that went away. And now you feel like, oh, we can't get back to it because I don't understand. Help them understand, right? Because for inclusion, in order to be included, you also have to, not be afraid to spill the beans as to what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the things that exhausts care partners is guilt. And guilt about, I don't know, everything. Guilt about losing your patients, guilt about leaving them home alone, guilt, guilt is everywhere. So you have a choice. You can be guilty about your aggression towards your person with Parkinson's, or you can have a nice day out with a friend and feel guilty about that. You might come home in a better state of mind when you finish having an experience with your friends and come home, as opposed to being home and angry. So we have to balance that expression of, let me do something for myself, because you have to say, is this a win? This might be a win-win, even though it doesn't look like a win-win to you. The other thing is, I used to accompany my husband to spinning class, unboxing class, and all that other. The beauty of going with them, first of all, you get to socialize with other care partners. And the most exciting thing about it is you see people with disability, but once you get to know them, you no longer see their disability. And I found that the people with Parkinson's have so much behind their disease. And it's so exciting to meet that person and not just think of it as their disease. So all of a sudden, a lot of my friends are people with Parkinson's. They're wonderful people. And so now I have an extended group of friends, the people with Parkinson's and the caregivers and my friends outside that world. And I can't tell you that I feel closer to my friends I've met through Parkinson's than any other group. So the care partner has to get out there with that person with Parkinson's. There's huge benefits in doing that for both of you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that'll
that's
cut
really
back on the
insightful.
isolation.
Yeah. That's really insightful stuff. In that there's a slippery slope about sort of trying to educate the public about the realities of Parkinson's, and keeping people engaged. I think we don't want to turn the average person on the street into a expert on Parkinson's, just like we don't want to turn them on an expert on any condition that might be unique. But we want them to be open and accepting. And this gets me to trainings that I would do with new staff that we hired to provide care to people we were supporting residentially at our agency in Pittsburgh. And the one thing that was just so powerful that resonated with the folks the new hires that we brought in, was to literally just use the golden rule, right? If this was me, how would I want to be talked to? How would I want to be dressed? How would I want to be fed? If this was me, how would I want to be socialized? Right? And so I think that ability to sort of get out of our own sort of individuality and our own little bubble, to begin to think about, if this was me wheeling into a room or needing a bath, how would I want that to happen, right? And so I think trying to sensitize the greater community to that is I think, it's not an easy task, but it's better, I believe, than trying to say, well, let me tell you about Parkinson's, and these are some of the manifestations. And so, you got on, or let me tell you about cerebral palsy and some of the spasticity, or let me tell you about traumatic brain injury and some of the, judgment issues that if you just use that golden rule, if this was me and I was in a restaurant and somebody came over, how would I want to be talked to? Or so there's a simplicity and a complexity to community building and to trying to address attitudes in the greater community. It's not easy, but it really is a simple message, right? If this was me, how would I want to be talked to?
I think what you're trying to do is return it to the humanity, right? Like, just like as
exactly.
human to human, how do what's our expectation?
Yes.
In terms of that. And I do think that there is a lot of, also Gail talked about guilt, and I know you're going to weigh in, Gail, just give me 1 second, but also anger, right? So there's anger at what our person with Parkinson's has taken from us as care partners in terms of the demands on our time and our energy and our incapacity to, have enough time and all of that stuff. So there's that too, and it's a lot that we have to manage. So, but at the same time, I think we're also asking the question of, we're trying to be healthy, and it's not healthy to feel guilt, to have anger, all of those things. And so how can we normalize our situation more? And I think that's what you're speaking to, Al, is what would we want to see in that situation, and try to act on it. And if we could all model that behavior, it would be easier, but it doesn't always exist out there, right? But Gail, you have something you wanted.
When Al was talking, I remember when my husband was ill, and we had a caregiver who was trying to be very, very nice, and she kept on addressing him as honey, sweetie, and I can see he was about to explode. I mean, this was a high-achieving man who ran a huge corporation, and he finally said, "I'm not your honey. I'm not your sweetie. You can call me Dr. Gittin, or you can call me Jean." And she was, "Oh, I'm sorry," but I never said anything, but I can see the volcano.
Yeah, but good for him for speaking up, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, honey and sweetie. I don't even call him. I call him Dr. Gittin.
Holly, do we have other questions?
Is there any evidence that staying social in early Parkinson's can help build comfort for later on with Parkinson's?
Can you just rephrase the question just a bit?
Well, this is what I got, so I'll rephrase it as I understand it. Is there any experience that being more social early on with Parkinson's can help you maybe become, as your Parkinson's advances, that those skills that you've developed will help you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any empirical evidence from studies, but my intuition tells me that the answer to that is yes. That if someone has more of a social bent in life before diagnosis, and stays social, that I think that definitely is a leg up for later on when things get, perhaps more challenging. I know, for example, with my dad, we would, as dad's situation became a little bit more complex, and we were still trying to make sure that he got out a lot, and that he started to fight that a little bit because he was feeling more embarrassed and shameful, as Connie had mentioned a minute ago. But we would be at church, for example, and people who knew my dad for years would kind of come over and they would ask me, my dad's sitting right there with me, and they would ask me, how's he doing? And that gets to Gail's point about sometimes how just in community, how people react. And I think that the answer to that is not necessarily, again, to try to give somebody information on Parkinson's or whatever the condition might be, but to really think back to our humanity that Connie mentioned a minute ago, that, just that openness to each of us as people, and that willingness to accept people for who they are, and rather than to somehow, some way gauge a pecking order of who's valued.
Al, you're from a big Italian family, as I recall, and
Yes.
looking at your last name. And, Davis and I lived in Italy for 3 years, and it was early in our journey with Parkinson's. And what I observed at that time was that people were more willing to step in and help without asking. If Davis needed a help, if we were at a soccer game or our son was playing and he needed help to get off a bus, if he'd gone on the team bus, to get to the game, they had their hand in his arm and helped him right in there. And it just made a big difference. If we sat down for a meal with people, they would reach in and help cut the food when he was tremoring a lot. And it depends what culture you live in, who you're surrounded by, how easy it is for people to jump in and help. And I think it's certainly easier when they can just do it without much.
Yeah, I think there's a piece to that, but I think, again, that has to be balanced. I know that, that my dad, didn't want people to pity him or to somehow, some way, overstep, and treat him like he was a kid, because of, a certain need that he might have. So I think there's a balance to that, but certainly in a more genuine way, that notion of offering, and then if the offer is accepted, great. If the person's sensitive about the offer, they can communicate that, and then the person can back away. We supported a guy for years who had cerebral palsy, who used 2 canes to ambulate, and he would often fall, especially if it was snowy or icy. And when he fell, he wanted to get up himself. He didn't want somebody to, lift him up. And I think some of that was just sensitivity, body sensitivity to somebody gripping him and pulling him up. And some of it was also, pride, where he didn't want people to jump in and take care of him. And so We were out one evening to the symphony. He was a great music lover, and we were at the symphony. We were walking into Heinz Hall, which is a beautiful, symphony venue in Pittsburgh, and it's a marble floor. It was wet. Harry slipped, went down, and I was with him, but I knew he didn't want me to pick him up, and so I said, do you need any help? And he said, no, I can get it. And people looked at me, other people, in Heinz Hall, thinking I was some cad for not helping, this poor, unfortunate, disabled guy up off the floor.
That was their view, right? Well, you know what? I have to interrupt there and say that, and Polly, you may remember this. We were in a meeting once where a gentleman, a care partner, told us that his wife refused to have him help her up, and in fact, he wanted her to actually yell, "Get up, get up, get up." And so it actually sounded like he was chastising her, but it was like her kind of cue to get herself up, because she wanted to know that if she was on her own, she could get herself up. But
a lot of people are afraid to approach someone with a disability. They don't know. They have this fear. They don't know how to do it. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to embarrass that person or themselves.
Yeah.
So they step away.
Yes.
And it's that thing. Very often when someone passes away, people don't know how to approach the widow or the widower. It's a discomfort that most people have, and it's hard to get over that unless you are in the kind of community we're in. So the other thing is, speak to all your friends and say, listen, this is what's going to happen. This is what we need to do. It's perfectly all right for you to come and help them up the step or down the step. And just put it out there.
Right.
Don't keep
Bill, I wanted to just react to something you had said earlier, because I thought it was really, again, insightful and important point. And that is when you said when you would go to events where you would be with other people, just being around them, you began to just be more accepting, more, just be more excited about meeting somebody new. And that point that you made in that comment is a really important point, I think, to challenge isolation and loneliness. And that's just being there. And even if you're not participating, just being there begins to somehow diffuse some of the, I don't know, either fear or misunderstandings that people can make. So one of the important, I think, lessons of inclusion to combat loneliness and isolation is to just be there. You don't have to be the star of the show. You don't have to be participating perhaps in everything that's going on, but just being there begins to allow other people to just see your humanity and begin to begin to come to a comfort level of you as a person. So regularity is what sociologists call that. It's a piece of the inclusion puzzle. If people two, I think, strategies: regularity and similarity. If we can find some framework of similarity, like with my dad, let me give an example. My dad was a jazz musician for most of his life. He loved jazz music. He wrote for Downbeat magazine all prior to his diagnosis. And so one of the things that we tried to do as a family is to get Dad back into the jazz community, right? And the Pittsburgh Jazz Society. And so this was toward, Dad's situation was becoming more complex, but just being there for him was therapeutic, even though, he couldn't play, of course, and he had difficulty talking. There were some hallucinations happening, but just being there softened other people in the jazz community toward my dad. And then when they found out that he wrote for Downbeat magazine, and that he had interviewed Ella Fitzgerald, and he had interviewed Duke, Ellington and Count Basie, and these great jazz musicians who came to Pittsburgh. It created almost this pedestal effect for the other members of the Jazz Society in terms of my dad's value in their eyes. So I think,
but this is interesting, Al, because I think that, so what you're saying, and this might be a good point to just zoom in on here, is that your person with Parkinson's that you're caring for out there, listeners, has areas of expertise and passions that they've maybe had to, that have slipped away. And so who in that community, I think that the big question too is who in that community would actually come and pick up your person with Parkinson's? So when you're asking, like, how do you ask for help? How do they take help? A lot of that is just training and it's finding the right people, right? So if there's people in your group, that former people in your music group or your dance group or your bowling group or whatever, you can try very hard to get those people back in your circle, coach them up a little bit to get your person back out there. And they don't, if they say, well, I'm not going to go because I can't play, I can't do this, all the things they can't do, but what can they do? I think that's what you need to be able to point out and allow them to experience that for themselves. And sure, if they go and it's miserable for them because they feel too excluded, and the group might not be making them feel that way. The inclusion piece has to come from within as well, right?
Sure.
And so I think that's a big part of it too. And the onus can't be always on the care partner, and so the training has to start early or has to start now to get your person used to having someone else, introduce them into things that they like to do or things that maybe they don't like to do. Like maybe they don't like that exercise class, but they know they got to go there.
Yeah.
Maybe we should try a different tack. Maybe we should tell our person with Parkinson's that they are needed in this group because they have something to offer. Let's not go so you can meet people. Let's go so people can tap into you. And as a caregiver going to these things, I've never gone to a session where I didn't learn something and network. But if you're a person with Parkinson's thinks that they're going to be a support for others, it might turn the dynamics around. I don't know. You can just try everything, but it is so important. And even if they moan and groan like a kid doesn't want to do something and they go and they have the best time ever, that's very likely.
And document it, right, Gail? Because you don't want that memory to slip away. Like when it does go well, say, well, wait, because maybe the next time they're like, I'm not going back to that. And you're like, yeah, but you were the star.
Exactly, right. And
one of the I think other dimensions here is the availability, or maybe the advocacy we should promote to create the availability of attendant care support for the person experiencing Parkinson's, as opposed to an expectation that a care partner is going to do everything for that person. I know in the work we did in Pennsylvania years back to develop an attendant care program available to anyone with disability, any type of disability, even people who had their husband, their wife, or somebody available, still was eligible for attendant care. And attendants can take people out and support them when they're out. They're trained or prepared. They're direct support professionals, and so attendant care can relieve the care partner a little bit of some of the demand, and it also create a little more autonomy for the individual experiencing the disability to be away from the care partner for some periods of time. And I do a lot of disability consulting on legal cases, and so I had a case where an individual had a traumatic brain injury from an automobile accident, and I was asked to do a life care plan for the family. So I wrote up a life care plan, and I included attendant care in there. And when the case went to trial, the defense attorney challenged me on the witness stand, saying, "Can't his wife take him out? Why do we have to have an attendant care? It's very expensive." And I said, "Well, that's not, her job isn't to necessarily be his caregiver. Her job is to be his wife, right? And there's times when she can do that, but there's also, it's not like an expectation 24/7 that the care partner is going to do that. So attendant care can offer another piece of the challenge that care partners sometimes feel, that they have to do everything, even if they don't want to, or if it's not relevant for them, or whatever the case might be. So we might want to think more about advocating for attendant care to be more available for individuals, so they can be more engaged in community and not necessarily, tied to the hip of their care partner.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Polly, what other, thank you so much for that, Al. And what are we missing here? Or what do you think? We got about 10 minutes left, not even.
Yeah. So, Al, is there such a thing in the general community called empathy fatigue? Somebody
Empathy fatigue.
that he's heard that. Is that a thing?
Yeah, there is. And empathy fatigue, has been looked at. There's not a whole lot of stuff in the literature base, at least to my knowledge. I'm not an expert necessarily in that field, in that topic, but I have seen articles, compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue, or synonymous kinds of phenomena, and that there's no question that someone can really, well, I mean, Gail expressed that, I think, really well just a little while ago, just feeling the pressure, to have to do these things for the person that you care for, and they feel if they don't do it, they're going to be judged that maybe they don't love the person, or they're not a good husband or a good wife, depending upon the situation that they're in. So yeah, and people can really struggle with that. They can really feel beat up by it.
Yeah, and I think there is some literature on that. We've just put something in the chat, but also compassion fatigue, and I think it's just to the point at which you've lost touch with your capacity to help your person. And we did talk about this a little bit in the last session with our social worker, Kathleen Christ, when someone asked very point blank, is it ever appropriate, or does the time come when the person caring for another person with Parkinson's can give up? And it was interesting, based on her experience, which is extensive with people with Parkinson's, she said yes. And sometimes it's a transient giving up, right? And that part of that giving up is letting your person be cared for by someone else and making those arrangements, which we all know are difficult and it's very painful. But there are times when you're so fatigued and you're so demoralized that you can't you can't do the job that's before you. But those of you who have the capacity now, the real lessons here are to try to craft ways to find more help. And I think what Gail's saying too is the people she's met within the community, and part of why the Davis Phinney Foundation has been here for the last 20 years is that we've been building community. And we build community so that we can look after each other. We can give each other advice like you get here. You're getting it from each other in the chat. And I love seeing that when you're communicating with each other. This is how you build community, and it's how you get you get, outside of yourself some time and give yourself time. You're buying yourself time and more space for compassion. But you also have to have that compassion for yourself. And my goodness, Gail, you have talked about that so many times when you feel built
I have something to say. After my husband passed, I think I realized the thing that I missed the most while I was taking care of him is myself, who I am, how I think, how I behave. You almost have to, or you forget, it's hard. You almost have to forget who you are because you have to put that on a shelf. And after years, you forget there's a who you are sitting on that shelf. And after my husband passed away, I took that who I am sitting on the shelf and put it back as a helmet on my head. And we give up an awful lot to be a caregiver. And it's a fight to keep a portion of who we are. And we all know it. We don't want to think about it, but we all know it. And that's why I feel I'm an advocate for caregivers, because even though I love my people that I know with Parkinson's, it's my caregivers that are giving up themselves. And it's the biggest sacrifice a person can do. So no matter how you act during the day, no matter how aggressive, no matter this, don't forget what you are putting aside, your life. And I don't know. I don't want to.
Well, you're getting a lot of love for this, and you're hitting as usual.
Well, we all think about that. Let's say it, even though we don't want to think that much about it. That's what we're most angry at, I think. I really believe that we're most angry at. We lost ourselves. And you give some of that up when you have a partner anyway. But it happens to be beautiful when you find yourself again.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, the way you have to find yourself is to reconnect with your life.
Yeah.
Thank you
Sorry,
so much.
guys. I mean, this is kind of serious.
Such an important.
Important.
Yes.
People need to hear that, Gail.
Yeah. Well, kind of you plow through it and you keep a lot of yourself. And I think I gave up just about everything. And it wasn't until my husband passed away that my sons crashed in on me and said, okay, you got to go back to this, and this. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, that isolation can distance you from your social capital. And when we think about couples, we have individual social capital, and then we have social capital as a couple. And as we isolate from those relationships, that's where the fatigue comes in that Polly mentioned a minute ago, where you begin to and you begin to lose, that part, and also you lose other people who might help in some way or might be available in some way. So social capital as an entity is really important to maintain and sustain as we go through journeys of supporting a loved one with a disability. Again, doesn't matter what type.
Let's
I don't want to be just all negative. There's a lot of positive in being a caregiver to someone you love.
Yeah.
And don't forget to pat yourself on the back because you're doing a great job. So, it's not all negative. I met phenomenal people, and I met a new part of myself. I reinvented myself, and half of myself got reinvented. And that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to close out now, but thanks so much, Al, for being with us and for us taking on this tough topic. I think it is a tough topic to talk about isolation and loneliness and inclusion. And we all have to fight hard to keep going. So thank you, Al, for providing your insight, both personal and professional. Thank you, Polly, for hosting us.
Of course.
And thank you, Gail, as always, for the incredible wisdom. As we send you out into this cold, at least in Boulder, Colorado, January day, you guys are down in warm weather, I know. We just want to say thanks for showing up. That's such a big part of this whole equation, is just showing up. And we'll be back. When are we back? In February. We're back
February 4th.
February 4th. And we're here for you. So as always, send us your questions and concerns. And sorry if we couldn't answer all your questions, but we're doing the best we can, right, Gail?
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you guys. I really enjoyed it, and look forward to some future engagements in whatever way might work best.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.